What's up, degenerates? This is Locked In. I'm your host, Mason Cameron at PFF_Mace on the Twitter. And with me, as always, my partner in crime, Vishaal Gupta at Vishaal_Gupta 95 on Twitter. V, we had a little bit of a rough go last week, but I'm not going to lie. I'm going to chalk it up to some teams just forgetting how to play football, one of them being the San Francisco 49ers. But we digress a little bit. We have a whole slate of games this week to get us back on the right track, and I love them. Personally, I'm really excited about this week. There's a lot of good matchups and a lot of opportunities to make some money. How are you doing today? Are you ready to break into it, V?
I'm doing great. Should be a very good weekend. No teams on bye, so we just have a full slate on Sunday, top to bottom. So it should be a long but fun day of football. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, it should definitely be a good one. And actually, as much as the game on Thursday night wasn't the best football all the way through, it ended up being a decently good game by the end of it. And it was a good money making opportunity for us because we talked about this one in our Discord a little bit. So shameless plug for anybody who is not in our Discord. Check it out, get in there. That's how you can ask us all the questions about any of the games that we don't break down, and definitely anything on Thursday night since it always happens before the show. So in order to do that, head onto the website, importantnonsense.com, become a member. That's how you get into our Discord. You can ask us all of your betting questions, and you can ask the guys any of your fantasy questions, and just get the whole layout of everything that you need before the games on Sunday. So definitely go check it out. But for starters, we're breaking down Thursday night. We had the Tampa Bay Buccaneers heading into Buffalo to take on the Bills. This game ended 18-24. It wasn't quite as close as the score would indicate, but that doesn't actually matter in the end, because what does matter is that Tampa Bay covered the 9.5 or 10 they were getting, depending on when you got them. I know that it moved up to 10 in the closing minutes, which is frankly insane to me, and has to be a lot of public money just moving the line, because this marks Buffalo's fourth game in a row that they failed to cover as sizable favorites. And they will probably continue to be sizable favorites as we move forward, because they are a fantastic team and they're a significantly better team than most teams in the league. But they're not covering spreads right now. And that's crazy, considering that through the first half of the season, for the first month of the season, they were blowing spreads out of the water. They had one of the highest against the spread margins in the league and have just kind of plummeted since. So here, Tampa Bay covers the 10. And one of the things that we were targeting, or I was targeting specifically for this one, was the under on 43.5. And we did clear just under that by a tiny, tiny little bit. It was a close one, but 42 total points. And like I said, the game just wasn't as close as the score would indicate. Tampa kind of fell short a little bit there late. And it just made sense why the under had some value here, with it being a short week. Baker dealing with the knee injury, both of these defenses being pretty good EPA defenses, and the Bills pass rush, which was one of the things we highlighted, that something had to give. Tampa doesn't give up a lot of pressure, and the Bills just get pressure in bunches. And that's what they did last night. You 28 pressures, 4 sacks, 1 called back off a bad penalty, 43% win rate. So they absolutely ate them alive in the pass rush. V, what did you make of this matchup? I know that we've been tailing Tampa quite a bit this year, and I think that this is kind of the reason why, because they're a scrappy team. They don't go away, and even when it looks like they might not cover, they put it in to really make a game close. So what did you make of their performance in this one?
It's interesting watching this Tampa Bay team the last few weeks. Like you said, we had tailed them a couple weeks before, has not worked out, and it's primarily just because the offense has not been there. This Tampa Bay defense has allowed in the last 3 games 20 points to Detroit, 16 points to Atlanta, and 24 points to Buffalo. They've lost all 3 games. That's just really not acceptable for them, because those are fantastic performances against solid offenses. You can't ask for much more, and to not be able to come out with a single win in any of those it's got to be disheartening. I'm not sure exactly what's going on with this Tampa Bay offense. I mean, I think they overall they do a good job of taking care of the football, and I feel like they have playmakers on the outside. This should be an offense that is a lot more efficient, but they're just not putting up points right now. So it's just one of those situations where you can't really trust this team to win games or cover spreads. But like you said, unders are definitely viable given how good their defense is and how mediocre their offense is. And then for Buffalo, it's a team you just don't know what you're going to get out of them any given week. So got to be definitely very wary of these larger spreads going forward because you just don't know if they're going to come out slinging or if they're going to be playing down to their competition level. They looked really good in the first half, but they just really didn't do anything in the second half last night. And those are just it seems like this is a Buffalo team that's going to be doing that constantly throughout the season. So maybe just a team to stay away from until they show us some consistency going forward.
Right, absolutely. And especially given, like we said, what they're going to be continuing to get moving forward, which is going to be far more, they're going to be laying far more points than they're worth every single week. As even though they're a great team, they're a
Mhm.
significantly more talented team than a lot of these teams. But you hit the nail on the head. It's which team are you going to get? The team that looks great for the first half and is blowing out a team and looks like they have everything locked up and the other team can't get anything going, or the team that collapses late in the half, like, Buffalo. Well, I shouldn't say collapses, but lets them get just enough back that all of these extremely large point spreads are hard to cover. So I'm right there with you. I agree. So that was Thursday night for us. We actually head into the games of the week. And for anybody who's not familiar, we don't break down every game on the slate, but just kind of our biggest ones, and actually even more so now. So starting this week, we've run back the games. We dialed back the number of games we're going to talk about every week. Hopefully that allows us to kind of cut a little bit of time off of the show, but also lets us kind of dive into the games even a little bit more, see anything else that we like to see. But also, that doesn't mean that we're going to have less picks. We're going to be putting all 10 of our picks that we take every single week into the Discord. So make sure you go check it out in there for even more picks, more value that you can find. And the first one that we have right here off the bat, the Rams heading into Dallas to take on the Cowboys. You're liking the Rams plus 6.5 here, and I can see why. I could definitely feel that. What are you seeing with this matchup that intrigues you to attack the Rams over maybe fading them for the clean under 7 points that Dallas is getting here?
Yeah, this is just a spot where it feels like it's too many points. This is a Dallas team that, just to be honest, has not looked great. The last couple games that they played, they had a fantastic start to the season, but a lot of that had to do with the teams they were going up against. The last couple weeks when they played good teams, they have not necessarily looked great, especially on offense. A couple weeks ago, they scored 10 points against the 49ers, and then they, got a nice win on Monday night the week after, but they only scored 20 points. It wasn't like it was some sort of dominant offensive performance by them. And now they're going up against a Rams defense that has been surprisingly good against the pass this season. They've only allowed 4 passing touchdowns all year. I mean, so this is not going to be a game where Dallas is going to be able to get whatever they want through the air, just going to be able to, throw it to CeeDee Lamb all the way up and down the field and just get into the end zone easily. It's going to be a tough game for them from that standpoint. And then they have not done a good job running the ball all year. Tony Pollard has not become that number one go-to type running back that we expected. So, they're struggling on the ground and, they're going up against a strong Rams secondary. So I don't think this is going to be some great Dallas performance on offense where it justifies them getting this many points. And then on the other side for Dallas's defense, like I said, they're great to start the season. But that's because they were going up against Daniel Jones, Zach Wilson, Mac Jones. I mean, it was not a very good slate of quarterbacks they played. And the last couple games they played, they got torched by Brock Purdy on Sunday Night Football. And then they honestly should have been torched by Justin Herbert on Monday night, but he missed a couple throws that were wide open down the field, especially with Keenan Allen that Herbert just missed. If he had connected on even one or two of those, it's a completely different ball game. And we're talking, a lot about what's going on with Dallas's secondary and what's wrong with the team overall. But because Herbert missed those throws, Dallas pulls out a win, and we're kind of talking about them as still being a upper tier team, which they might not be. Now they have to go up against Cooper Kupp and Puka Nakua without Trayvon Diggs. I mean, I just don't see them being able to slow down this Rams offense enough for them to be able to cover almost a full touchdown. Now, there is a concern for the Rams. It is their offensive line. They have allowed 18 sacks this year, which is tied for eighth most in the league. Now you're going up against Micah Parsons, that Dallas defensive line that can wreck games single handedly. So that's definitely a concern. But just again, 6.5 is too much for a Dallas team that has not looked good against average or to above average competition. So definitely got to take the points in this one.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, and especially when we talk about like the thing about the Dallas defense right now is they are getting that pressure, and that could be an issue with the Rams, which we've talked about in previous weeks, how we've targeted teams that have played them that rush the passer a little bit well. But those other teams have played better in the secondary than the Dallas's secondary has played at least in the couple of recent weeks, in terms of like yardage and kind of letting these 1 or 2 points or these 1 or 2 throws kind of get away from them, just like you talked about with Herbert, where Herbert hits those throws and it's a completely different game and a completely different narrative for the last 2 weeks, essentially. So I'm right there with you too. And the biggest thing also is that this Rams offense has looked significantly better than this Cowboys offense. The passing game in the Cowboys just doesn't quite look like it's going to be scaring anybody right now. And the Rams look poised to kind of take care of those type of offenses who don't really have that identity solidified, at least through this type of or through this far into the season. It looks like Dallas wanted to run the ball a lot, but they just have not really been efficient in any means. Now, a lot of people who are like probably sitting there seeing Pollard's, fantasy rankings and whatnot, and they're like, oh, he's been fine. It's like, yeah, but they've been very middling considering how much they've put into his volume wise. So I'm right there with you too. I think that's way too many points. And even though you would hope and you would rather get the 7, 6.5 is more than enough when we're talking about the game's probably going to be within 3. So I agree right there with you. And the Rams actually have a really good opportunity, even potentially to win this game,
Yeah, I was just
which
gonna say this is a nice upset spot for sure.
right, exactly. Now it's not going to be one of these things that you go and, put a ton of units on them taking the money line, but you could get a very realistic dollar amount here with it looks like about plus 230 at point bets, so probably about plus 200 at pretty much every other book. So that's a pretty good price there at for that kind of value, at least in my opinion. I would agree. So
Yep.
so that one does that one. Into the next game on the clay on the on the slate. On the slate, I said clay and then splate, and then it's
Third
okay.
time's a charm.
We got it. We got it eventually. We got there. So it's because I'm excited, V. It's because I love watching the Texans play football, and I just don't even know why. Because they're just so much fun. They're easy to root for too. They're just, they're just
Yep.
unassuming. Nobody thinks that they're going to be good, but now they're good. And it shows because now they're a 3-point favorite on the road. Well, Cat, we're going to talk about against the Panthers because, the Cat always comes up when we talk Panthers, but the Panthers have been going in a rough circle right now. And I like Houston to cover this one at 3, even though it's not under the key number of 3. CJ Stroud versus Bryce Young, both teams coming off a pie, but Carolina is just atrocious against the spread. They are the only team in the NFL who has yet to cover a game this season, 0-5-1, 0-1-1 as a home dog. They've only allowed 2.5 points. Excuse me, 20.5 points per game allowed in home games, though. But I just don't think that that's going to matter at all because Houston has won 3 of their last 4 outright against teams of similar or better caliber than I think Carolina is putting out right now. Carolina, they've given up 42 in each of the last 2, albeit both on the road. But I think that these guys have ears, and everybody in Carolina kind of gets what's happening. They realize that they just drafted a quarterback first overall that haven't played that well, and they've played horrendously and have yet to win a game. There's rumors that Brian Burns is on the trade block. Now I know that the running line is that they want to keep him and try to make it work out, but we all know what that means. That means they're actively shopping Brian Burns, and that a lot of people on this team are probably not super motivated to win games, unlike Houston is right now. Houston is after it. Houston knows that they're not just rebuilding right now. They're 3-3, and their division is not that good. Now, I don't want to sit here and be like Houston's going to be competing for this division by the end of the season, but Houston might be competing for the division by the end of the season.
They got a game up on Jacksonville already, so they got a good shot. That's for sure.
So it really just comes down to that this team controls their destiny and they are playing good football. Now, obviously, we've talked about some of their issues on defense. They've started to pick things up. Will Anderson is playing pretty well. He had his best pass rushing game right before they went on bye. I think he had 8 pressures, which is a huge day for him. If he can start getting things going and they can be okay in the secondary, that could mean a lot for them, regardless of if they are horrendous stopping the run. And then we've already talked about what CJ Stroud has done. The comparison between CJ Stroud and what Bryce Young does is like night and day right now. Frankly, if you go through and try to watch every big throw that Bryce Young has thrown so far this year versus every big play that CJ Stroud has thrown this year, they look like night and day. CJ Stroud is making some amazing throws, great timing, great feel. And his intellect is actually off the charts. And I laugh about it because who was the company? I forget. I don't even know if they announced it, but there was that company early on in the draft process that was saying something like CJ Stroud, graded the lowest in this, test on
It's probably the
quarterback
Wonderlic or
acumen.
something dumb like that,
No,
right?
it wasn't the Wonderlic. It wasn't the Wonderlic, but it was one of those like that. But it was just one of those things that's like, okay, well, then tell us what's in the test so that we can like understand and know. And it was one of those type of things that was kind of the beginning of markets moving from CJ Stroud to Bryce Young for the first overall pick. And now that we're 6, 7, 8 weeks into the year, there were those rumors and those, post-game pressers where they didn't look very happy. They were
Mhm.
saying, hey, ownership was the guy responsible, or they were saying everything but that. And now look where we're at. CJ Stroud is balling. Bryce Young is struggling. It's not all Bryce Young's fault necessarily because they've kind of struggled in all facets of the game and not just his quarterback play specifically. But there's something to be said there that CJ Stroud is absolutely balling his face off, and he will continue to. And I think that this is a perfect opportunity for him to flex over the first overall pick and take this as, it took me a while, but I don't even know the last time. I looked back quite a while and I couldn't find the last time they were a road favorite and won that. And it's going to be a momentous occasion for him. So I'm excited to watch this game, even though it's not a great matchup, but I think that this is a great opportunity for the Houston Texans to kind of show that they're in that next tier of teams and not in that lower tier. V, is there anything that you see from this matchup that kind of excites you or anything that I missed on that one?
No, I'm pretty much right there with you on this one. I definitely think, Houston is a play in this game. There's just nothing to get excited about with this Carolina team. I mean, they don't really do anything well. They don't throw the ball well. They don't really run the ball well. They don't do anything special on defense. You talked a lot about Brian Burns. He's already listed as questionable for this game. He might not play. They're saying it's not related to any trade noise, but who knows? It could be, a little bit of both, that he's actually dealing with an injury, and partly because they are planning to move him hopefully before the trade deadline next week. So it's just something to watch. But yeah, I mean, there's no part of the game where Carolina has the advantage over Houston at the given moment. Houston has the better weapons, they have the better game plan, they have the better coaching. Their defense is definitely playing at a very high level right now. Their last game out, they gave up 13 points to the Saints. The week before that, they only gave up 21 to Atlanta. A couple of weeks before that, they gave up 6 to the Pittsburgh Steelers. So this is a defense that is playing fantastic right now. and you're going up against the Carolina Panthers team that can't move the ball even if they're playing a bad defense. So it's going to be a struggle. So definitely agree with you on Houston. The under looks like an interesting play as well, and I'll probably have a prop pick on this one as well in our Discord. So check that out over the weekend.
Definitely. Can't wait to see that one too. And you know what? Shout out to Houston. I'm going to be rooting for Houston here moving forward a little bit here. I like watching them play. I think they have a lot going for them for sure. So
Yeah, definitely
that's
fun
going to
when
be
you have
cool.
Nico Collins on your fantasy team. So definitely rooting for that.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. All right. So the next game on the list here that we're checking out is actually, uh, ah, you know, it's not the most interesting matchup, but I think it's an opportunity to make money given how I am slightly confused how it's not closer to 3 here, but we have Minnesota taking on Green Bay in Green Bay, and the Vikings are minus 1.5 on the road. Now, all in all, that doesn't seem like a huge deal because I like how we talk about it a lot. When it's underneath 3, a lot of times you're just taking a pick 'em. In Minnesota, given kind of what they did last week against San Francisco, I get that San Francisco was hurt, but they won outright as a dog. You got to give them credit for that. But that's not the only reason Minnesota is an intriguing pick right here. 3-1 against the spread in their last 4 and 2-0 this season as a road favorite. That's really all that you need to know. And all those games came against teams that are playing significantly better than Green Bay. I understand that 92% of this handle right now is on Green Bay, at least the cash is. And you might even wait for this game to move closer to a push or to a pick 'em, but I am unafraid of that. Because when you look at how Green Bay has played as a team in the last few weeks, going 0-3 against the spread on the road. Granted, 2 of those were on, or excuse me, 0-3 against the spread in the last 3, but 2 of those were on the road. They came against Vegas and Denver. We've talked about Vegas and Denver a lot as teams that you attack, as teams to take advantage of this season, at least in a sense on the line and in the totals. And they did not even cover against them. And granted, they didn't cover at home against Detroit either. I don't know. Now, Minnesota is not Detroit. And that game ended up being a little bit closer at home. And Green Bay obviously is going to play a little bit better at home than they're going to play on the road. But this Minnesota team just pretty much control the game against one of the better team, or I shouldn't say one of the better teams, one of the best teams in the league in San Francisco. And it wasn't just because of the injuries on offense for San Francisco. They got what they wanted defense against that defense too. And that's probably the most impressive piece of this game because that San Francisco defense was lights out until these last couple of weeks, and they've kind of just fallen off a cliff. And we'll get into the talk about the San Francisco game a little bit later and what's going on with them. But wow, here I think that Minnesota at anything underneath -3 is a huge value here. Is there anything that you're seeing with this one? I'm a little bit shocked. Are you as shocked as I am with this line here? Or is there something that you're seeing in this one that I might not be seeing?
I would say I'm a little bit. I would say I'm a little bit shocked, but overall, this is a game that I saw that I just wanted to stay away from. To be honest, there just feels like there's a lot of unknowns here because both teams are dealing with quite a few injuries. We already know that obviously Justin Jefferson is out for Minnesota, but they also had injuries to Hawkinson and Jordan Addison in their Monday night game. Both of them did come back, but to be honest, those injuries looked kind of severe, and it could limit them even if they do end up playing this week. I don't know if either of those guys are going to be 100%. My biggest concern with Minnesota is that even though Kirk Cousins looked good and the passing game looked really good on Monday night, is that this is a team that just cannot run the ball. They have 0 rushing touchdowns this year. That just makes it super tough to play offense well consistently on a week in, week out basis. I mean, they only scored 13 points on offense a couple weeks ago against a terrible Chicago defense. So it's just not a team that I feel like you can consistently trust on offense to get the job done. And for whatever, smack we want to talk about Green Bay and their offense, you do have to give credit to their defense because they have played fairly well this year. Last week they only gave up 19 points to Denver. The week before that, before their bye, they only gave up 17 points to the Raiders. They've been a solid defense throughout the year. It's just that their offense keeps failing. I mean, they lost both of those games I just mentioned, even though they gave up less than 20 points. So it just kind of feels like a game where neither offense is going to be able to do a whole lot necessarily, and it's going to be kind of dictated by the defenses. So I feel like this is a game that's really going to come down to the wire, and to have faith in either of these quarterbacks right now is not something I'm interested in doing. So I'm probably going to stay away. Maybe the better play for me would be an under, but yeah, going to stay away from the spread.
Yeah, and I think the question here, one of the biggest like deciders for me is that Minnesota, as much as them being 3-4, seems like they're not that great of a team. They're very middling, which those things might be true, but they're also not that far away
Yeah.
from winning this game and leading this division. They could lead the North uh, with just a little bit of luck here, some things swinging their way. So that'll be an interesting draw for them because who knows? They could go from being a seller at the trade deadline here come Halloween on Tuesday, or they could be buying if they
Yeah,
really want a
sure.
little extra firepower for, if they think that they're going to have a push. That's going to be something interesting to watch moving forward to see if that team's motivated. And that's kind of where I lean for it. That might be the extra deciding factor, but I could definitely see what you're saying too, because it is a question about what they're going to do running the ball, because they have not run the ball at all. And I think everybody thought Alexander Madison was going to be kind of a great replacement for Dalvin, and they were going to end up playing well, but that just never worked out. And he's actually been, I shouldn't even say like he's been bad. I mean, he's just definitely been a net negative for them so far. He
Hmm.
had a ton of turnovers early. It's not just that he hasn't scored, he's been giving the ball away and kind of been ineffective largely in terms of an efficiency and a yard per carry kind of basis. So that's going to be something interesting to watch. But then again, I still think Minnesota's got that touch, and they're going to end up taking it. Uh, we'll see though. We'll see though.
Yeah, for sure.
The next game we have on the list is another interesting one where Philly heading into Washington to take on the Commanders. This is a crazy one because everybody saw what happened the last couple of weeks between both of these teams, and an interesting dynamic between when these teams play and who ends up showing up and how they play. They played very close the last time they played. So this is an interesting one. And you're leaning on something on the side of the total here. What are you targeting for this one specifically?
Yeah, I'm liking the over at 43.5 points. It feels a little low to me, specifically because this Washington defense has just not been good enough this season. You look at the score from last week and you say, oh, they only gave up 14 points. So, they're probably still an okay enough defense. But that was against the New York Giants. 14 points against the New York Giants might as well be 50 against any other team. That's how bad the Giants are offensively. So, this is just not a good Washington defense. From weeks 2 through 5, they gave up 33 points or more in every single game, including 34 points to these same Philadelphia Eagles in week 4. This Washington defense ranks in the bottom third in passing yards allowed and passing touchdowns allowed this season. And now they're going to be without their starting linebacker, Cody Barton. So their run defense could struggle as well this week. That is just not a good combination when you're going up against this Philly offense that is just can hit you from every single direction, whether it's AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, DeAndre Swift, or Jalen Hurts doing it with his legs. They just have so many weapons that if you can't slow down anything, you're just going to get torched all day. And then I think Washington's offense has not been great, but I think they're good enough where they can score at least in the high teens in this game, which would probably push this total over pretty easily. I feel like this could be like a 31-17 type game where you're clearing the total in this one pretty easily. So it's definitely like the over in this game.
Yeah, AJ Brown is unguardable.
Yep.
Absolutely unguardable. So if they, and this is kind of what we've talked about in terms of kind of the Phillies issue offensively, is that they are a little bit complacent in terms of their play calling and how much they attack. Hopefully, they had a shot across the bow in the last game, and now they're going to probably push the ball a little bit more, attack more, take their opportunities when they get them more, and just feed these receivers the ball. They have so much talent, and sometimes I feel like they get just a little, in their own head and behind the eight ball when they really don't have to. Play aggressively, and you're going to beat nearly any other defense in the league. So I'm right there with you, and I agree. Washington is just good enough that they can potentially go over with this one. And if we continue to talk about trade rumors, both of the Washington edge defenders are quote unquote up for sale / haven't been getting calls on / are getting calls on. So, you know, the rumor mill is spreading. So I would keep an eye on that. And one of them might be looking to have a good game, or, maybe one of them, doesn't. And we'll see how
Yeah.
that ends up panning out. But that's going to be a huge deciding factor in this game for sure. And or I shouldn't say a deciding factor, but an aspect that could help to take the Eagles to another step in terms of their scoring to give us a leg up on this over here. Because you're right, 43.5 is not an undoable number. I don't actually have it right in front of me. I did have it up a second ago. But if we looked into how many times they've gone over a number like 43, I would imagine that they're probably shooting a pretty good percentage over the last 2 years. So
No,
over
for
the
sure.
last
Especially
season
when
and
you're
a
scoring
half.
30 pretty much every game. It's not that hard to go over on those kind
Exactly.
of low 40s.
Exactly. We talk about it all the time. It takes that 2 to tango. And if you're having a team that's hitting those 30s fairly often, and makes it easier to only need like 13, 14, 17 in order to get your overs that you need there. So I'm right there with you though. The next game,
Whew.
a legendary Meadowlands matchup. New York taking on New York in New York. The
In
Jets
New
to take on
Jersey.
the Giants. In New Jersey, you're right. In New Jersey, the Jets taking on the Giants. And for me, there's a lot of interesting aspects to this game, if I'm honest. I'm leaning towards the game total here, which is 35.5. And I know before you guys say anything, I know 35.5 is such a low number. And anybody who watches any of these shows knows which way I'm going to lean. It's the under, baby. I always take the unders. And here we go with another one. And I actually like the 35.5. Yes, it's a low number. I wish it was higher, but I don't think it's going to matter when it ends up being like 24 total points scored in the game. When we look at what this Giants team, they are a case study in just unrealized expectations, or maybe over expectations for a team in the modern NFL, especially for offensive football. To think that this team is better offensively when Tyrod Taylor is in the lineup than when Dan Jones is in the lineup is embarrassing. So this Giants offense, 1-6 going over on games this season. And the last time they did that was in week 2. So it's been a number of weeks since they've done that. They went an entire month without scoring a touchdown until Tyrod Taylor threw 2 last week versus Washington. Like you just said, to score for Washington to allow 14 to this Giants team, it might as well have been 50. And then when we look at what they should expect playing against the Jets, that's a different beast entirely. They held this Philly team to 14 points. Jalen Hurts had 3 interceptions, and that was without Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed, who are both projected to be coming back this week, cleared from the concussion protocol. Hey, I think that that's all you need to know, that they're going to be scoring 10 or less in this game, pretty much as their running, expectation has been this far in the season, because they've just very much struggled scoring points. And honestly, like a great mental exercise or question for this game is that I'll actually post for UV right now is, okay, in an alternate universe, Dan Jones is playing this game. How much does the line move?
The spread, I don't know, maybe a point in the Giants' favor, maybe.
Yeah, and maybe a point. I think most people would be like, or I shouldn't say most people, but I think in most situations, if you were like, you're going to have your starting quarterback over your backup quarterback, you'd be like, Yeah, I'm not going to be. I get that they both play in New York and that plays a factor into it, but you would definitely not be like, yeah, you're you're going to be laying more points, or I mean, you're going to be having more points with your starter than your backup. It
Yeah.
just doesn't make a whole lot of sense there, but that's a huge piece of why this one falls into where it is. But the second reason is we've talked about it a bunch, but this Giants defense, as atrocious as they were all the way up to this point in the season, they've played a little bit better over their last two. They held Buffalo to 14, they held Washington to 7, and the Jets aren't exactly playing like I shouldn't say they're horrible offensively because they're not. They do just enough to not give the game away, which is all that they needed for a long, long time. That was all that we've talked about that the Jets needed was like, hey, if they're going to be okay, Zach Wilson needs to not give up these games. And that's kind of what he's done. He hasn't been amazing. Hasn't really done anything. He's just been a game manager, but he's kind of reduced those crucial errors that have given away the game. I know that they scored 20 points against Philly last week, but it was just one touchdown, 4 field goals, all from generous field position from this Jets defense. 4 field goals. I mean, that's all you need to say. If you're getting 4 of your 5 possessions as just field goals, yeah, you're going to have some issues there. So I think that even at 35.5, I'm more than comfortable taking the under here because it's going to be one of those really tight games where neither of these teams really have the offensive pieces to really push the issue. And when you stick in a team like the Jet or a unit like the Jets defense, it kind of flips everything on its head. And it's going to be a really hard going to find any points in this one. I don't foresee this one being on red zone that much this week. So,
Oh,
uh, sorry for all the fans in New York that have to watch it. But hey, I guess, we were, I was listening to the PFF NFL show and they were talking about how they split up the season tickets. And I was just sitting here wondering, like, do you guys really think it matters who they're giving the season tickets for? I'm like, if you're the Giants season tickets holders or the Jets season tickets holders, I think at this point they're just trying to find people to put in the stadium.
yeah, they're paying people to come in. That's for sure.
Yeah. So, Pete, is there anything that you're seeing with this one? Or, I mean, definitely don't feel like you have to wax poetic about this one because surely enough, there's not that much to be said about the New York football Giants taking on the New York football Jets.
Yeah, you covered a lot of it. I'll just add in both teams have some injuries on the offensive line as well, which is definitely not going to help. Giants are going to be probably without Andrew Thomas again for, I don't know, 6 or 7 straight game. So now you're going up against a fantastic Jets front seven. So that's going to be more trouble for them. The Jets did lose Elijah Vera Tucker in their last game against Denver. So now they have to go up against Dexter Lawrence and Kayvon Thibodeau, while they're undermanned. So that's also not going to be good for the Jets offense. So yeah, it's going to be a slog for both teams offensively. Under makes a ton of sense to me.
If only it were anything different than them both struggling offensively. It's kind of death taxes and teams in New York struggling offensively.
Yep,
In the
for sure.
MLB too, it's just like in the MLB. So, speaking of, shout out to the World Series. Anybody who watched the World Series show earlier today, shout out to you. Appreciate you. Um, so we move on to the next game we have on the slate here, and that actually heads into the afternoon slate or the later slate. Um, the first game that we're taking a look at, Kansas City and Denver, head to head in Denver. And you know what? We both had this one, but for the sake of having a little bit more variety, I'm going to let you take this one because all that I ever have to say about this one is the KC defense is good, guys. We keep telling you the KC defense is good, and eventually you'll believe us. And it's funny because it kind of plays into, one of our tropes from last year was like death taxes and Broncos unders, and now it's same thing with KC and opposite, and now they're headed head this week. So what do you make of this one?
Yeah, so definitely going to be taking the under again on this one at 47. I am not sure why the number was so high. I think it has dropped down a little bit to around 46 or maybe even 45 and a half. But the fact that it even started as high as it did is baffling. I mean, at some point, people will, bookmakers will realize that they're opening these numbers too high. But until they do, we're gonna keep taking advantage. Kansas City's defense was great again last week against the Chargers. They only allowed 17 points, 0 in the second half. It was kind of a miracle under for both of us. Both teams combined for 41 points in the first half, but only scored 7 in the second. So we got a nice push that kind of came out of nowhere. So thankful for that. But I think it's going to be a little bit easier of a time to hit the under this week. Denver's offense is still just terrible. They have scored 19 or fewer points in each of their last 2 games, and they have scored 21 or fewer points in 5 of their 7 games this year. There's just not a lot of scoring going on for that Denver offense. Good, positive for them though is that their defense has been better the last couple weeks, allowing 36 total points in the last 2 games, including just 19 points to Kansas City a couple weeks ago on Thursday Night Football. So it really seems like the return of Justin Simmons has, brought back this defense to playing, somewhat as close to what they should have been all along, and not being this terrible, record-breakingly bad defense that we saw the first month of the year. So both defenses playing fantastic or playing very well, and then both offenses not quite, maybe a little bit above average for Kansas City, but definitely below average for Denver offensively. So you should be an easy under when you're getting it at 47 points.
Yeah, and like you said, we got a little bit lucky with the push where we got, but I think it's that they showed that they can turn around and have a half like that where,
Yeah.
when we're kind of sweating an under or something and they get 30 total points combined in the first half, we're not super worried about the second half because they can turn it on when it matters. That has been their strength this year, and it's probably going to continue to be their strength. They are building a more defensive football team than they've been known for in the past. And like we continue to talk about every week, we're going to keep taking advantage of these inflated overs. And even if we miss a few here or there, the value continues to lie with these unders until they lower these game totals. Until
Yeah.
we start seeing these game totals towards 45, where we actually have to start thinking about them, it's just not going to matter. At 47, at 48, at 49, at 50, we are going to continue to attack the under. If you are listening to this, odds makers, please don't let us keep taking your money on these unders, because I feel bad about it at certain points because it's just too easy at that one. They just keep overinflating it. And I get that part of that is the public inflating the number, but at a certain point, you just got to set the line right and it'll figure itself out.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
the next game on the list is actually a really exciting one. Cincinnati taking on San Francisco. I'm not going to lie, when a few weeks ago, probably a month ago, I was really worried that this was going to be a terrible game and a blowout. But here we are. And it might even be a different game than many might expect. So Cincinnati heading into San Francisco to take on the 49ers. And we are actually both liking the line here with the dog. We're taking Cincinnati +4, and it looks like it's getting crazy here. It looks like it's actually shifted to all the way to +5 at DraftKings.
Wow.
This actually might even be just an entry error, considering that they're all the way across the board at the higher values on everything. So we might have to double check that, because I don't know that I saw it at 5 earlier, but 5 would be insane, and I definitely would like 5. But we are fully comfortable with 4, and there's a lot of reasons for that. V, when you see this matchup, though, what really stands out to you as why Cincinnati might carry the value here?
Yeah, this is just a situation where I think the Bengals have the quarterback advantage in this game. We talked a lot about at the beginning of the season that we had a lot of concerns about Joe Burrow and the calf injury. He just did not look anywhere close to 100% to start the year. Then they had that game in Arizona where he looked significantly better. He was moving around, getting the ball out quickly and getting it down the field to Jamar Chase. They followed it up with a game against the Seahawks where it wasn't necessarily perfect, but it was still an improvement for Burrow in terms of his movement and getting the ball out. Now they get a bye week, and he just gets extra time to rest up the calf. So I feel like we're really going to see for the first time this year as close to 100% Joe Burrow as we've seen all year. So that's really exciting. So getting a healthy Burrow and 3 points plus a hook or even more than that, it's too hard to pass up. You're going up against a San Fran defense or roster just in general that is very banged up. Debo Samuel has already been ruled out. Trent Williams missed practice all week and is questionable. The big question mark right now is Brock Purdy. He was in concussion protocol earlier this week, and it really looked like he was going to miss this game. But some reports came out right before we started the show today that he is actually looking to be on track to play on Sunday if he's able to pass the final test in the protocol. So he could be in line to play in this game, but he's definitely not going to be 100%. You have a concussion like that and you miss some practice time and you're in the protocol. It definitely doesn't mean you're going to come back and be 100% that quickly. And I think it's very interesting that this game opened up at 5.5 point spread for San Fran when we thought Purdy was going to play. Then the news came out about the concussion and it only dropped to 3.5. So they're really saying Purdy is only worth 2 points to the spread. I think that says a lot about how bookmakers, think about Purdy as a player overall. I mean, if Joe Burrow were to miss time, Bengals spreads would drop by way more than 2 points. I mean, so I think there's a very big quarterback advantage going on for Cincinnati, regardless of if Purdy plays or Sam Darnold plays in this game. So when you have the quarterback advantage and you're getting this many points, you just can't pass it up.
Yeah, and another tidbit is I don't know where I found it off the rip. I want to say it was from Vic Troja, who was on the PFF NFL podcast show. Again, shout out to PFF. And I couldn't find it again when I was looking for it, but I want to say that he had said a stat that was since the start of last season, just one player has ever been cleared. Since the change in the concussion protocol rules, only one player has been cleared within the same week, within a 7-day period, in order to play the next week.
I think that was Tua last year before that Thursday night game against Jacksonville, or it was against Cincinnati maybe, and he got hurt. Obviously, we had that whole situation on that Thursday night game. So,
and they've been very hesitant, and players have not been playing. If you've made notes, we just talked about Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed both missing last week. When a lot of people thought they might be able to play, they both missed last week, and now they're cleared to play this week. And something very similar could be happening with Brock Purdy if that were the case. I know that people are excited because, hey, he might play this week because he practiced. To be honest, do not be surprised if the NFL, independent neurotrauma consultant says he's not playing, because they have not let very many players do exactly what they're saying he is about to do. So when you look at it with that approach, even if he were to play, I think that still puts them at a significant disadvantage given how they've looked with the other injuries. And even if the fact that Trent Williams did not practice all week, but now comes out as questionable, just tells me that they're going to sit there and say, he's not 100%, but he's going to give it his all and he's going to try. These teams are technically going in opposite directions when we think about it. The last 2 games for each of these teams, Cincinnati 2-0 against the spread, San Francisco 0-2 against the spread. Cincinnati coming off of their bye, well rested. San Francisco needs their bye next week more than anything. They are limping into their bye right now. And I'm sure that they're really happy with the schedule makers for putting random weeks in the middle of the season where every single team is playing, whereas they could have had their bye, I don't know, maybe this week, like right when they really, really needed it, instead of having to wait an extra week for some arbitrary reason. I don't know if they did that in weeks past, but as a man in the industry who has to break down every single game every week, you adding the extra games in the middle of the season does nothing but grinds my gears, NFL. Let's get it together here, and maybe next year give us a little time off here. How about? No. But anything. Jokes aside, there it goes. Drop the headphone, as I always do. All jokes aside, San Francisco, they're limping right now. Cincinnati, they finally started to get their stride. Now, granted, San Francisco's not in trouble by any means. They're still going to be a very good team moving forward, but they really do need to get healthy and kind of get off of the schneid, as would per se. And San Francisco, 17 points each of the last 2 weeks is just not going to cut it when you're taking on Cincinnati when they're actually clicking. I think the +4 and any more points they want to give me, I'm more than comfortable taking. So,
Yep, for sure.
Like
And now they're going up against a Cincinnati defense I forgot to mention that has 5 takeaways in the last 2 games and 7 sacks. So not only
yeah,
is their offense playing better, their defense has definitely stepped it up. So definitely feels like all signs are pointing towards Cincinnati in this one.
right. It's like the team when we talked about this early on, where it was like, hey, everybody's going to talk about the trend of, hey, they start really bad, but they get it together after a few weeks, and maybe that was a narrative that took a little bit longer. But that was all that was, is just a narrative. This team just needed to kind of get back on track and feel better about what they were doing as a team. And now they do. And now you can kind of approach them as you would have regularly and not as this team that just kept shooting themselves in the foot over and over and over and over again. Because it really did look like Joe Burrow's calf was a pretty crucial issue for them. So
Yeah, for sure.
the next game on the list, you know, this one might not be the prettiest. It might not be the flashiest, but it's going to be an interesting game of some. I at least love watching the Cleveland Browns play football. And I get it. Before anybody hits up my Twitter and says, oh, Mason, you took Cleveland and Indy last week under and they had like 80 combined points. Like, before anybody comes at me like that, I get it. I understand. But if we're to be fair, it was because Gardner Minshew was doing gunslinger type things where he was responsible for pretty much every point on the field, regardless of who was scoring the point
The dude had 4
directly.
touchdowns and 4 turnovers in
I
one
know.
NFL game. How do you even do that?
I don't even know. He was both a gift and a curse. He scored pretty much I shouldn't say scored, but he was either directly or indirectly responsible for pretty much every point scored in the game, whether it was by his team or the other team. So that's kind of where we're gonna push to that. One of the things that we can kind of note with the market for this game is 90% of the money on this handle so far is on the under. And it only makes sense given kind of what we've seen from Cleveland in terms of defensively and in terms of at the quarterback position. Deshaun Watson's going to be out again. I don't know what's going on with the Deshaun Watson situation. So, my friends and family, please stop texting me and DMing me asking if Deshaun's going to play this week. I don't know if Deshaun's going to play ever.
I think he's already been ruled out for this game.
No, I know he's already been ruled out, but I'm just saying I don't know if he's like, I don't know what's wrong with his shoulder. I don't know what's wrong with the concussion. I don't know if he has beef with the coaching staff. So people can stop texting me and asking me. But it's just an interesting aspect of what's going on there in Cleveland under center, because there's reports that Deshaun's shoulder is okay, but they continue to say it's not. And, who's to be believed or whatever. None of that actually matters because PJ Walker is due under center again, unless I missed something, some other mystery signing of who they added to the team. 7 turnover worthy plays in 2 games, 0 touchdowns. That's really all you need to know with PJ Walker. Like,
Yeah.
that's just not going to cut it for an NFL starter. And I get that PJ Walker, we've talked about his record against the spread and how teams tend to like him just because of his experience and kind of tenacity. But what he's been doing over there right now is just not going to cut it. 7 turnover worthy plays in a 2-game span will never be starting quarterback caliber. And it's actually going to give away a lot more of their games than it should. And that's just part of the factor here when we talk about Seattle on the other side of the ball, at least offensively. DK should be back, but Tyler Lockett, hammy, questionable. So, you lose one, you gain one. I guess, you'd rather have DK than Tyler Lockett, but still having both of them would be much better. Step forward, step back type of thing. And the big question here, though, is Kenneth Walker. So Kenny Walker was limited in practice pretty much all week, but then makes it to Friday and they gave him no injury designation. So his calf has been hurting him. My question being is he really 100%, or did they take him off the injury report to kind of, I don't know, a little bit of gamesmanship with the injury report? I don't know. I'm just speculating at that point. But if he is not 100% and the Seattle Seahawks are unable to get their running game going, that could spell trouble, because if Cleveland is able to pin their ears back, with their pass rush and tee off, it's going to be an incredibly long day for Geno. Because that offense getting one-dimensional means that the Browns can do exactly what they do well defensively, which is rush for and play man coverage behind it and really just suffocate any life that they're going to have in the passing game for Seattle. They need to get the running game going, and if it can't get going, this is an easy under at that point. Now, it's a question of, what's the defensive points going to look like in this one? Because obviously, whenever Cleveland plays, they've been turning over the ball quite a bit and giving themselves really good field position. So that'll be a question. But as a lot of you probably remember, just a couple minutes ago, we took a game at 35.5 under this week. 38 is not a scary number by any means, especially when you talk about a Cleveland team who has hit under 38 far more than they haven't this year in terms of game totals. So that's the way that I'm going to lean for that. V, are you seeing anything with this matchup, or what do you make of what's going on under center in Cleveland right now?
Yeah, it's a tough situation because he looked pretty okay a couple weeks ago against San Francisco. I mean, he didn't have any passing touchdowns, but it seems like he managed the game well. He threw the ball a lot to Amari Cooper and just kind of trusted him to make plays, and he did, which kept them in the game and really helped them win that game. But like you said, he also just has so many turnover worthy plays that are kind of killing this team at points in the game. So it's tough to trust whatever is happening in Cleveland, whether it's Walker under center or Deshaun Watson or Dorian Thompson Robinson. It seems like it's just kind of a mess over there. Seattle is kind of a bit more interesting for me, especially Geno, because I feel like he's been one of the more polarizing players this year in terms of his play so far this season. There's like a lot of times where he looks like he's unstoppable. He's just kind of throwing flamethrowers and unstoppable passes up and down the field. But then there's times where he just makes some boneheaded turnovers. I mean, they only scored 20 points last week against a bad Arizona team, and they almost blew that game mainly because of turnovers by Geno and turnovers in the red zone. You go back a couple weeks before that against Cincinnati, where they had multiple opportunities to win that game. They got into the red zone over and over and over again, but they just could not convert, whether it was turnovers or settling for field goals. This is a Seattle team that is really just not living up to expectations right now offensively. They're just not, being efficient right now. So if you're going to get two teams who are just not playing super well on offense, you're definitely going to want to take the under in that situation.
Right. And, I think a handful of weeks ago, even at, a decent record like 4-2, I think a handful of weeks ago, if we were approached by this similar circumstance, we'd probably have leaned towards Seattle at a
Mm-hmm.
line like 3.5. But I think you hit the nail on the head. They have just been inconsistent, to say the least, in how their passing game looks and how Geno takes care of the ball himself and how he pushes the ball. It seemed like last year he didn't have anything to lose. And while he wasn't gunslinging it, he was taking care of the ball and taking the big plays when they were there. And it just seems like that. I don't want to say like that magic, because that's just such throwaway analysis, but that expectation of performance has definitely diminished over the last 4 or 5 games or so. So that's going to be
Yeah.
something to watch moving forward, and definitely one of the reasonings why an under makes a lot of sense here. Um, and hopefully eventually they'll kind of figure it out, because they're fun to watch when they're really good and clicking and everything's going well for them.
Yeah.
That's
There's
for sure.
definitely going to be in contention for that division, going forward, especially
Yeah,
as San Fran continues to, you know, not play as well and aren't able to get healthy. So definitely going to be interesting to watch. They're a good enough team. They're just not playing super consistently right now.
exactly. Couldn't agree more. So the last game we have on the slate, we jump all the way to Monday night, where we have the Las Vegas Raiders taking on the Detroit Lions in Detroit. V, you have a really good pick for this one. I won't tease anything. I won't even spoil anything for the people at home. V, break this one down for us. What are you targeting, and why are you attacking this one?
I am taking Detroit minus the 8 points in this game. We all saw it last week, one of the crazier results in the league so far this year. Detroit got absolutely demolished by the Baltimore Ravens, 38-6. They just really never stood a chance. They were beaten in all three phases. They couldn't move the ball on offense. They could not stop the Baltimore Ravens on offense. Just a total ass kicking. But now these Lions get to play the Las Vegas Raiders, one of the worst teams in the NFL. This is a perfect get right spot for them. This Raiders team has scored more than 20 points in just one game this year. That's when they scored 21 against New England a couple weeks ago. They were averaging just 16 points a game, third fewest in the league. They're averaging 68.5 rushing yards per game and only 3 yards a carry. Both of those are the worst in the league. This Raiders team just gave up 30 points to undrafted Division II quarterback Tyson Bagent and the Bears last week. That's almost impossible to do. The Raiders defense has just 5 takeaways on the season, tied for the fewest in the league. Josh McDaniels, I think, is hands down the worst coach in the league right now. He constantly decides to kick field goals and then go for it and then kick field goals again, even though they're down 3 or 4 possessions. Nothing he does makes sense. This is a terrible, terrible, terrible Las Vegas team. Take the Lions and as many points as you can.
And as many points as you can. I love that. And I think you hit the nail on the head. When you watch what happened with the Bears, that's all you really need to know, frankly. And I get that, we took a huge bath last week with Detroit because we were all really all over Detroit. And I mean, myself specifically, I thought the Ravens on their best day weren't going to be able to do what they did to Detroit. And you know what? That's okay. Because every team kind of needs that wake-up call. Detroit is not as bad of a team as they looked like playing against the Ravens. And honestly, that's a promising sign for a Ravens team that we had some questions about, which will answer some of those questions moving forward. But this is going to be a great indication of really where that pecking order is, because as good or, as bad as the Lions were that last week, the Raiders are just not anywhere near that caliber of the team that the Ravens are to kind of pull a repeat performance, or maybe, quote unquote, as I've heard some people saying, catch the Lions sleeping. Like, they're not going to catch the Lions sleeping, guys.
No, I mean, I didn't even mention their quarterback situation. Jimmy G looks like he's going to play, but it matters in the slightest. I mean, he's one
I
of the
don't
worst
think it really
quarterbacks.
does.
He's one of the worst quarterbacks in the league. He's missed like 2 or 3 games. He still has more interceptions than touchdowns. He's a terrible quarterback, and it does not matter who is under center for this Las Vegas team.
Well, and and we've been talking about the trade carousel, the trade rumors. You've got the Adams trade rumors swirling around now. They're not as prominent as some other guys around the market. But hey, guys have ears. Guys hear things. They have feelings. You talk about trading them. They never really usually love it. Or maybe they do, and, they're excited for the potential move. But right now, there's not a lot going for them in Las Vegas right now. And Detroit is really poised where, yes, we're talking about a line like 7.5, 8.5 points, depending on where you play and where you shop. And that shouldn't really worry you, because it's going to be closer to 10 by the time this thing is done, if not to 14, a clean 14. So I'm right there with you, V. I think that this is a great value here, and unfortunately, it has to be in prime time. So, so that does it for that one.
Terrible prime time.
That is a terrible Monday. So hopefully you guys have something better to do on Monday, and we'll make some money in the background for you. But that does it. That wraps us up for week 8. Goodness gracious, time is flying, V. We are back same time next week, 8 p.m. Eastern. Everybody check out importantnonsense.com. Like I said, that's how you get into our Discord. Become a member there. Get into our Discord. You can ask us any questions you have about the slate. If there was any game that you didn't see us break down, that you want our input on for the betting markets, let us know. We'll definitely break it down. You can check out any of the fantasy guys, ask them all your questions about your fantasy team. And also, new added this week, we are adding even more picks to the Discord this week. So there's going to be extra picks, 9 or 10 picks, or even more by us every single week. So go check that out in the Discord, in the betting tab. You're going to want to see some of those ones. We got some good ones in store. And also, if you guys need any of your IN merch, shop importantnonsense.com, promo code LOCK. Check it out. We really appreciate it. Any support really helps us and all the guys. So, yeah, that about does it, V. I'm excited for this week. It's going to be a good week of football, and we're going to make that bounce back. Do you have any parting words for the people at home, V?
Make sure everybody gets their rest. It's going to be a long Sunday, tons of games going on, full slate. And then, like Mason said, make sure you hop into the Discord. We're going to have a lot of extra picks in there. So check those out and make some money along with us this weekend. Should be a good one.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun, and appreciate everybody stopping by. And until next time, good night and good luck.